Let me set the stage for you. It was a regular Tuesday night. I'd just gotten back from a grueling day at work, the kind where you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders and just want to collapse onto the couch with a beer. My wife, Lisa, was in the kitchen. I could hear the clinking of pots and the faint sound of her humming to herself. That little hum used to be my favorite sound in the world. Used to be. Dinner smelled incredible, and not just in the usual way. Lisa was a decent cook, better than me, for sure. But she had her limits. Meatloaf, spaghetti, some simple stir-fries. Nothing fancy, but it was always good enough. Tonight, though, it was like I'd walked into a five-star restaurant. The air was rich with the aroma of something buttery, garlicky, and maybe even a little exotic. My mouth watered instantly. "What's all this?" I asked, hanging up my jacket. The table was already set, candles lit. She didn't do candles for dinner, not unless it was a special occasion, and as far as I knew, it wasn't our anniversary or anything like that. "Just thought I'd try something new," she said, flashing me that smile that used to light up my world. "You've been working so hard lately. I thought you deserved something special." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something felt off. You know that gut feeling? The one you can't explain but just gnaws at you? That was me right then. I couldn't put my finger on it, so I shook it off and sat down at the table. The food was incredible. A perfectly cooked steak, medium rare, just the way I liked it, with some kind of fancy herb butter on top. There was a side of creamy mashed potatoes with a texture so smooth it was almost unnatural. And the vegetables? Grilled to perfection, with just the right amount of seasoning. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow after the first bite. "This is amazing," I said between mouthfuls. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Lisa blushed a little, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh, I've been watching some cooking videos online. Thought I'd surprise you." It was a good answer. Too good. I nodded, pretending to buy it, but that gnawing feeling in my gut only grew stronger. Lisa wasn't the type to dive into new hobbies out of nowhere, especially not something as demanding as gourmet cooking. She barely had time between work, yoga, and whatever else she did during the day. But again, I let it slide. Maybe I was just being paranoid. After dinner, she seemed jumpy. She kept asking if I liked the food, if it was good enough. Her hands were fidgety, and she avoided my eyes. I tried to make a joke about her being nervous, but it didn't land. She just laughed it off and started cleaning up. I wanted to let it go. I wanted to believe that she'd gone through all this trouble just to make me happy. But something wasn't right, and deep down, I knew it. Little did I know, that steak wasn't just a dinner. It was a breadcrumb, leading to the truth I never wanted to find. That steak haunted me. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I know that sounds crazy. Who gets hung up over a piece of meat? But it wasn't just the food. It was everything. The candles, the way she blushed, how she wouldn't meet my eyes. It all felt rehearsed, staged. And the more I thought about it, the more that gnawing in my gut twisted into a knot. I tried to push it out of my mind at work, but I couldn't focus. The idea kept circling back, louder and louder, until I finally caved. On my lunch break, I called Lisa. "Hey," I said casually, "about dinner last night. That was amazing. You really should make that again sometime." There was a pause, just a split second too long. "Oh, sure," she said, her voice a little too bright. "I'll, have to find the recipe again." Find the recipe again? That's when the first real crack appeared. Lisa was meticulous with her recipes. She had them all saved in this little notebook she kept in the kitchen drawer. If she'd made that dish, it would already be written down. Still, I played along. "Where'd you find it, anyway?" I asked, trying to sound as casual as I could. Pinterest, I think. Or maybe one of those cooking blogs. I don't really remember." Another crack. Lisa didn't use Pinterest. She told me 100 times she couldn't stand how cluttered it was. And if she didn't remember the blog, how had she learned to cook a dish that complicated? But I didn't press her. Not yet. That night, after she went to bed, I started digging. I felt like an idiot, sneaking around my own house, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. I started with her notebook. Nothing. Not a single recipe for steak or anything close to what we'd eaten. Then I checked her phone. Locked, of course. She'd never bothered with a passcode before, but now it was locked tight. That's when the knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. The next day, I decided to test her. On my way home, I stopped by the butcher and picked up a couple of steaks. I walked in the door with a grin, holding up the bag. Guess what? You inspired me last night. I thought I'd try my hand at cooking dinner. Lisa froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. That flicker of panic before she plastered on a smile. Oh, that's sweet of you. You sure you don't want me to help? Nope, I said, heading for the kitchen. I got it covered. I didn't have it covered. I had no idea what I was doing, but that wasn't the point. The point was to see how she'd react. She hovered near the counter, watching me like a hawk as I fumbled with the meat. I asked her for tips, but she just shrugged, saying she didn't remember exactly how she'd done it. The woman who'd supposedly cooked that perfect meal last night couldn't remember how to sear a steak. Right. After dinner, a disaster, by the way. She seemed relieved, like she'd dodged a bullet. But the look on her face just made me more suspicious. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what. And then, a couple of nights later, I found it. She was in the shower, and her phone was on the nightstand. I don't know what possessed me, but I tried her old password, the one she used before she locked everything. It worked. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through her messages, but at first, I didn't see anything. Just conversations with friends, coworkers, nothing suspicious. Then I opened her chats with a guy named Tom. Tom. I didn't know a Tom. The messages weren't explicit, at least not the ones I saw. But they didn't need to be. There were little things, inside jokes, playful banter, a familiarity that didn't belong between a married woman and another man. And then I saw it. Glad you liked the steak. One of his messages read, I'll teach you how to make the sauce next time. My blood turned to ice. I put the phone back before she came out of the shower, my mind racing. It wasn't just a recipe. It wasn't just dinner. This guy, this Tom, he'd been in my wife's life long enough to teach her how to cook, long enough to make her nervous, long enough to ruin the home I thought was solid. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I wasn't going to let her get away with it either. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind was spinning, replaying everything over and over. Every smile, every late-night yoga class, every time she'd seemed just a little too happy or a little too distracted. It was all falling into place now. And Tom? Some guy I didn't even know existed was suddenly all I could think about. I wanted to confront her right then and there. Rip open the bathroom door and demand answers. But I stopped myself. I didn't want her to spin some story or turn it around on me. No, I needed to know the truth, the whole, undeniable truth, before I faced her. The next day at work was a blur. I couldn't focus. I barely even remember driving home. All I knew was that I had a plan, and I was going to see it through. I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. When I got home, Lisa was in the kitchen again. The smell of garlic and butter hit me as soon as I walked in. Another special dinner, no doubt. The kind of thing she never used to do. I stood there for a second, watching her move around the kitchen like she didn't have a care in the world. My jaw clenched. I wanted to grab her, shake her, scream at her. But I didn't. Not yet. Hey, she said, turning to smile at me. You're home early. Dinner will be ready in just a few minutes. I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds great. I'm starving. She went back to cooking, and I slipped into the bedroom. Her phone was charging on the nightstand. Locked again. I grabbed my laptop instead and started pulling up her location history. She didn't know I'd set up a family tracking app on her phone months ago. It was supposed to be for emergencies, but now it felt like a lifeline. Sure enough, her history was littered with trips to places she'd never mentioned. Cafes, parks, even some apartment complex downtown. All during time she was supposedly at yoga or running errands. That's when I made my decision. I was done playing games. The next morning, I told her I had a work meeting and left the house early. I parked a couple of blocks away and waited. If she was meeting Tom, I was going to see it with my own eyes. I didn't have to wait long. Around 9 a.m., she walked out of the house, dressed a little too nice for running errands. I followed her at a safe distance, my heart pounding the whole time. She drove straight to that apartment complex. I parked across the street and watched as she walked up to one of the units, glancing over her shoulder like she was afraid of being caught. That was all I needed to see. I wasn't going to sit in my car like some private investigator, waiting for more evidence. I was done waiting. I marched up to the door, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't knock. I pounded on the door so hard it felt like it might come off its hinges. After a few seconds, the door creaked open, and there he was. Tom. He wasn't what I expected. Mid-30s, average build. A guy who looked like he worked in an office and spent his weekends tinkering with his car. Harmless. Except he wasn't harmless. He'd stepped into my marriage, into my life, and he'd ruined everything. "Can I help you?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Yeah," I growled, shoving past him into the apartment. "Where's Lisa?" Tom's eyes widened, and he stammered, "Wait, who are you?" Before he could finish, Lisa appeared from the hallway. Her face went pale the second she saw me. "Mark," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I barked, my voice shaking with rage. "What the hell are you doing here, Lisa?" "Huh? Playing house with this guy? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" She started to say something, but I wasn't interested in her excuses. I turned to Tom, who looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. "You teach her how to make steak, Tom? Was that fun for you? Cooking lessons with my wife." My voice was rising, my anger spilling over. "You think you can just walk into my life like this? You think I'm some kind of idiot?" "Mark, stop!" Lisa shouted, stepping between us. "It's not what you think." "Don't you dare," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare stand there and lie to me. I saw the messages. I followed you here. How long, Lisa? How long has this been going on?" Her lip trembled, and for a moment, I thought she might actually come clean. But instead, she just started crying, covering her face with her hands like she was the victim here. I couldn't believe it. "You're unbelievable," I said, shaking my head. "Both of you." I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. My blood was boiling, my head pounding, but one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I drove home in a haze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands started to ache. My mind was a storm. Rage, betrayal, humiliation, all crashing into each other. I kept replaying the scene in that apartment, Lisa's tear-streaked face, and Tom standing there like a deer caught in headlights. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Hell, I wanted to drive back and punch him, but I didn't. Not yet. When I got home, I poured myself a stiff drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the remnants of a life that now felt like a lie. The little things started to stick out. The framed wedding photo on the wall, the magnet from our honeymoon, the stupid coffee mug she bought me that said, "World's okayest husband." I almost laughed at that one. Almost. It wasn't long before Lisa showed up. She walked through the door, her face puffy from crying. For a second, she just stood there, staring at me, like she wasn't sure what to say. I didn't make it easy for her. Well, I said, my voice low and cold. You've got a lot of explaining to do. She took a shaky breath and sat down across from me. Mark, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I slammed my glass down on the table, the sound echoing through the room. Don't give me that. You didn't mean for it to happen? What? You just tripped and fell into his arms. How long? Lisa, how long have you been lying to me? She flinched, her eyes welling up with tears. It's not like that. It's only been a couple of months. Months, I repeated, the word tasting like poison. Months. So you've been sneaking around, cooking dinners for him, sleeping with him, and I'm just supposed to what? Sit here and forgive you because you're crying? I didn't sleep with him, she said quickly, her voice rising in desperation. I swear, Mark, it never went that far. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. Do you think I'm stupid? I followed you to his apartment, Lisa. I saw you. I read your messages. You've been meeting him behind my back, lying to me, and now you want me to believe it was all innocent. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't done. And that dinner? The steak? You cooked it for him, didn't you? And when he couldn't make it, you served it to me instead. Is that it? You made me eat his dinner. Her face crumpled, and she started to sob. She didn't deny it. She didn't say a word. That silence hit me harder than anything else. It was true. Every suspicion I'd had, every little gut feeling, it was all true. I stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. Unbelievable. I gave you everything, Lisa. A home, a life, my trust. And you threw it all away for some guy who, what? Taught you how to make steak? What the hell does he have that I don't? It wasn't like that, she said through her tears. I was lonely, Mark. You're always at work, and when you're home, you're exhausted. We stopped talking, stopped connecting. I didn't mean to hurt you. I spun around to face her. So this is my fault now? You cheat on me, and somehow it's because I work too hard? Are you kidding me? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing harder. I felt a pang of something. Pity, maybe, but it was drowned out by the overwhelming tide of anger and betrayal. I can't do this, I muttered, grabbing my keys. I need to get out of here. Mark, wait. But I didn't wait. I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, my thoughts spiraling in every direction. I couldn't go back, not yet. I couldn't look at her, couldn't be in the same house where everything had fallen apart. Eventually, I parked in some empty lot and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. My life felt like a train wreck, and I was the only one left standing in the rubble. All I could think about was how I was going to pick up the pieces, and whether Lisa would still be there when I did. By the time I got back to the house, it was past midnight. The lights were still on, and Lisa was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. Her head snapped up when she heard the door, and for a moment, there was this flicker of hope in her eyes, like she thought I'd come back to forgive her. She couldn't have been more wrong. I walked in and shut the door behind me, leaning against it for a moment before speaking. I've had some time to think, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, and I've made a decision. Lisa looked at me, her face pale. Mark, please, can we just talk? Oh, we're going to talk. I cut her off, stepping into the living room. But I'm not interested in excuses or apologies. I've heard enough of those already. What I want now is the truth. All of it. She hesitated, her hands clutching the edges of the blanket like it could shield her from what was coming. I've already told you. No, I said sharply, my voice rising. You've told me what you think I want to hear. Now, tell me everything, Lisa. How long? How did it start? What the hell were you thinking? Her lips trembled, and she took a shaky breath. It started a few months ago, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I met him at a coffee shop. We just started talking. It was innocent at first, I swear, but then we kept running into each other, and I don't know, Mark. It just happened. It just happened, I repeated, shaking my head. That's the best you've got? You don't accidentally end up in another man's apartment, Lisa. You don't accidentally cook dinner for him. She winced, but I pressed on. Did you sleep with him? I demanded, my voice cold and unforgiving. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. I told you, it never went that far. We kissed, but that's it. I swear, Mark, I swear on everything, it never went further than that. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of a lie. I didn't know if I believed her, but in that moment, it didn't really matter. The damage was already done. You destroyed us for a kiss, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. You threw away everything we built, everything we were, for some guy who made you feel special for 5 minutes. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I don't know what to say, she sobbed. I love you, Mark. I made a mistake, but I love you. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling, we can. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. Just stop. You don't get to say you love me, not after this. Love doesn't do what you did. Love doesn't lie, or sneak around, or destroy the person you're supposed to protect. That wasn't love, Lisa. That was selfishness. She broke down completely then, her sobs filling the room. I stood there, watching her, feeling nothing but a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. I'm leaving, I said finally, the words hanging heavy in the air. Her head snapped up. What? No, Mark, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. I know we can. I can't stay, I said, my voice firm. I can't look at you and not see him. I can't sit at this table and not think about that dinner. I can't live in this house and pretend like nothing happened. You made your choice, Lisa. Now I'm making mine. I turned and headed for the bedroom, grabbing a duffel bag and stuffing it with whatever I could reach. Lisa followed me, pleading, begging me to reconsider, but I didn't even look at her. I couldn't. When I finished packing, I walked to the door and stopped, turning to face her one last time. She was standing there, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly, and then I walked out. That night, I checked into a cheap motel and stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define me. I'd pick up the pieces, rebuild, and find a way to move on. Without her. Without them. Because in the end, I deserved better than steak dinners and empty promises. I deserved the truth.